My partner has cheated on me with our assistant. We've been together 13 years. He wants to leave and explore his feelings for her. Do I let him go, or fight for us? Life is often an unexpected intertwining of stories, where joy and pain walk hand in hand. Our relationship, once, was like a thrilling novel. We were the kind of couple who could unravel any mystery, overcome any challenge. We laughed, planned for the future, and were the team that everyone who believes in love dreams of being. But perfect stories rarely stay that way forever. Gradually, shadows began to creep into our lives. They were almost imperceptible at first, like a slight chill that seeps through an open window. Sex, an important part of any relationship, became a rarity, almost like a holiday you anticipate but don't always get. He was always less interested than I was, and over time, I stopped even trying. He felt guilty, and I felt the growing distance between us. Our work wasn't just demanding. It drained the life out of us. He struggled with difficult people and situations, which made him even more withdrawn. Over time, as if in an attempt to please everyone, he began to lose himself. He couldn't say no, even when it caused him pain. And, of course, he avoided conflicts like the plague. I, on the other hand, always rushed to resolve any issues immediately, never giving them a chance to grow into something bigger. Then, after months of this tension, came his confession. It was like a thunderclap, splitting the sky of our once secure life. He was in love with our assistant, the woman I had brought into our circle. Not just in love. He had slept with her 5 or 6 times over the past 3 weeks. His confession was like a lightning strike. How had this happened? How had our strong, almost unbreakable relationship turned into this? He told me it all started at his company's summer party, where, drunk, he let her get too close. From that moment, she became an obsession. His thoughts spiraled further. He started thinking about the children we didn't have. Her talk of wanting many children dug into his heart like thorns, making him realize things he hadn't considered before. In desperation, he even asked her if she wanted to have his child. She refused but didn't advise him to talk to me, his wife, the woman who had always been by his side. With each passing day, his obsession grew, and our communication turned into emptiness. He withdrew, wearing headphones during our usual hikes, avoiding the usual household tasks. And I, feeling our world collapsing, told him that he needed to figure out what he wanted from life. We decided to take a break, 3 weeks to think things through. These 3 weeks were supposed to be a time for reevaluation and reflection. But he used them to spend more time with her. He even bought condoms, though he later admitted he didn't use them. He sought comfort in her, a refuge, something new and exciting that seemed lost in our relationship. And then, the day before our scheduled meeting, he went to see her again. I asked him if there was someone else, and he lied to me, saying there wasn't. But by that point, I already knew the truth. I felt it deep in my heart. When he finally confessed everything, it felt like the world had collapsed. Everything we had built, all our memories, all our hopes for the future, everything crumbled in an instant. He agreed to go to therapy, but with each passing day, his doubts only grew. I love you in my own stupid way, he told me. But I felt like he had already made his decision. Now, at the age of 38, I'm faced with a choice. Do I let him go, allow him to leave for her, or do I fight for our past, for what I believe was real? The pain tears at my heart, but deep down, I believe that his infatuation with her is just a fleeting obsession, a cliché that could destroy everything unique we had. Am I a toxic girlfriend? It was almost 2 years ago when we first met. I was 21, fresh out of college, and still figuring out who I was and what I wanted from life. He was 22, confident, ambitious, and full of charm. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, one of those casual gatherings where everyone seems to know everyone, except for that one intriguing stranger who catches your eye from across the room. That stranger, of course, was him. We clicked almost instantly. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he listened, that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We spent the whole evening talking, laughing, and discovering that we shared so many interests. from our love for late-night walks in the city to our obsession with obscure indie bands. By the end of the night, it felt like we had known each other forever. Over the next few months, our connection deepened. We started dating, and it wasn't long before we became inseparable. Our relationship grew naturally, with each day bringing us closer. We celebrated our first anniversary with a weekend getaway to a cozy cabin in the woods, where we spent our time hiking, cooking together, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was perfect. He was perfect. But, as with all relationships, things began to change as time went on. It wasn't a sudden shift, but rather a gradual evolution. The honeymoon phase started to fade, and reality set in. We began to face the typical challenges that any couple goes through: balancing our careers, maintaining our social lives, and finding time for each other amid the chaos of daily life. We argued occasionally, but nothing out of the ordinary. I believed that we could handle anything as long as we were together. Everything seemed to be going well until he started his internship. It was a significant opportunity for him, a stepping stone toward his dream career in marketing. The company was prestigious, and he was thrilled to have landed the position. I was proud of him, of course, but I couldn't shake this nagging feeling of unease. Maybe it was because I knew how competitive the industry was, or maybe it was because I was worried about how the long hours might affect our relationship. But I pushed those thoughts aside and supported him wholeheartedly. The internship was demanding, with long days and late nights, but he thrived in that environment. He would come home exhausted but exhilarated, eager to share stories about his day. I loved seeing him so passionate about his work, but I also missed the time we used to spend together. Our late-night walks became less frequent, and our conversations grew shorter, often interrupted by the buzz of his phone with work-related messages. One day, he mentioned that he had made a new friend at the internship, a woman named Emily. She was 24, just a year older than him, and a full-time employee at the company. She had been assigned as his mentor, guiding him through the complexities of the job. He spoke highly of her, praising her intelligence, her work ethic, and how helpful she had been in his professional growth. I didn't think much of it at the time after all. It was only natural for him to form connections with his colleagues. But as the weeks went by, I began to notice that he was mentioning Emily more and more. Every time we talked about his day, her name would come up, whether it was about a project they were working on together, a joke she had made, or how much she had taught him. It was clear that they had developed a close friendship, and while I didn't want to seem insecure or jealous, a small seed of doubt started to take root in my mind. His internship eventually came to an end, and I was relieved, thinking that things would go back to normal. I imagined us finally having more time for each other, reclaiming our late-night walks, and reconnecting after the hectic months. But even though the internship was over, his friendship with Emily continued. They stayed in touch, texting regularly. He assured me that their conversations were strictly professional. Nothing flirty, nothing to worry about. But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. Why did they need to keep in contact now that they were no longer colleagues? What was so important that they had to talk every day? I tried to dismiss these thoughts as irrational jealousy, but they kept gnawing at me, refusing to be ignored. One evening, after he had spent most of dinner texting her, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I told him how I felt, that I was uncomfortable with how much they were still talking, especially since they were no longer working together. I explained that I didn't see the need for them to continue their friendship now that the internship was over. To my surprise, he listened to me carefully and agreed to stop texting her. He promised that he would respect my feelings and cut off contact with her. For a moment, I felt a sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew I was asking a lot, but the fact that he was willing to make this sacrifice for me reassured me that our relationship was strong, that he cared about my feelings. But that sense of relief was short-lived. A few weeks later, I noticed that he was still in active conversation with her. It wasn't just a message here or there. They were texting regularly, just like before. My heart sank. I felt betrayed, hurt that he had broken his promise, and unsure of what this meant for us. When I confronted him about it, he apologized for not keeping his word. But he also made it clear that he didn't see a valid reason to stop texting her. He explained that their friendship was innocent, that there was no hidden agenda, and that he valued her as a friend. He didn't want to cut her off simply because I was uncomfortable, especially since there was no concrete reason for my discomfort. I was torn. On one hand, I understood where he was coming from. I knew that I was being unreasonable, that my request was based on insecurity rather than logic. But on the other hand, I couldn't help but feel hurt. He had promised me something, and then he had gone back on that promise. It made me question everything: his commitment to me, our relationship, and whether I was being too controlling or toxic. As I grappled with these conflicting emotions, I began to reflect on my past relationships. I realized that my current insecurities were deeply rooted in those past experiences. I had been cheated on before, in a similar situation, where what started as an innocent friendship turned into something more. That betrayal had left scars that I thought had healed, but now I was starting to see that they hadn't. I tried to rationalize my feelings, telling myself that this situation was different, that my boyfriend wasn't like the others. He had always been honest and trustworthy, and I knew that he cared about me deeply. But the fear of being hurt again was so overwhelming that it clouded my judgment. I found myself questioning every little thing, every text, every interaction, every laugh they shared. It was exhausting, and I hated that I was feeling this way. What made it even harder was that I wasn't normally the controlling type. I had never asked him to stop texting anyone before, and he had female friends that I had no issue with. But there was something about Emily that unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just about her being another woman. It was about the connection they had formed, the bond that had grown between them, and how it seemed to be infringing on what I considered to be our space. I knew I was being irrational, that my fears were based more on my past than on the present. But I couldn't help feeling the way I did. It felt like a losing battle, one where no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the insecurity and the hurt that this situation had caused. As the days went by, I started to notice changes in our relationship. They were subtle at first: a missed call, a short text message, an evening spent in silence instead of conversation. But they grew more noticeable over time. We weren't as connected as we used to be. The easy, flowing conversations we once had now felt forced, and the time we spent together felt strained, like we were both tiptoeing around something that neither of us wanted to address. I couldn't help but wonder if his friendship with Emily was more than just that. Was he developing feelings for her? Was she becoming more important to him than I was? These thoughts consumed me, and the more I tried to push them away, the stronger they became. I started to doubt myself. Was I being too paranoid? Was I letting my insecurities ruin our relationship? But then, a small voice inside me would whisper that something wasn't right, that my concerns were valid, that I wasn't imagining things. This back and forth tug of war in my mind left me emotionally drained and confused. One night, after weeks of internal struggle, I decided that I couldn't keep these feelings bottled up any longer. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, but I couldn't focus on the screen. My mind was racing, and I knew I had to say something. I paused the movie and turned to him, taking a deep breath. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked at me, concern in his eyes, and I knew that he could sense that something was wrong. "I've been feeling really insecure lately," I began, choosing my words carefully. "And it's about your friendship with Emily. I know I've already brought this up before, but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right." He didn't interrupt, letting me continue. "I know you've told me that there's nothing going on, and I want to believe that. But the fact that you're still in touch with her, after promising me that you would stop, it hurts. It makes me feel like my feelings don't matter, like you're prioritizing her over me." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with how to respond. "I understand why you feel that way," he said finally. "And I'm sorry that I broke my promise. But you have to understand that I didn't mean to hurt you. I just don't see a reason to cut her off when our friendship is innocent." "I get that," I replied, my voice growing more frustrated. "But it's not just about the friendship itself. It's about the fact that you promised me something and then went back on it. It makes me feel like I can't trust you." "That's not fair," he said, his tone defensive. "I've never given you a reason to doubt me before. Just because I didn't keep one promise doesn't mean I'm untrustworthy. But how am I supposed to trust you if you're not willing to compromise?" I shot back. "If you can't even respect my feelings enough to let go of a friendship that's causing issues in our relationship?" We both fell silent, the tension in the room thick and suffocating. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between wanting to make me happy and holding on to something he believed was harmless. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about Emily. It was about something deeper, about our relationship, our boundaries, and how we navigated the challenges that came our way. That night, after our heated discussion, I lay in bed wide awake, replaying the conversation in my mind. I felt torn, caught between my love for him and the fear that our relationship was slowly unraveling. I didn't want to lose him, but I also didn't want to ignore my own feelings and let them fester into resentment. The next day, I decided to take some time for myself to think things through. I went for a long walk, trying to clear my head and gain some perspective. As I walked through the park, I reflected on everything that had happened, the initial excitement of our relationship, the changes that had come with time, and the recent challenges we were facing. I realized that I needed to be honest with myself about where my feelings were coming from. My insecurity wasn't just about Emily, it was about the unresolved issues from my past that I had never fully dealt with. I had been carrying the baggage of those past betrayals into my current relationship, and it was unfair to both of us. But I also recognized that my feelings weren't completely unfounded. Trust was a two-way street, and while I needed to work on my insecurities, he also needed to understand that his actions had consequences. Breaking his promise, even if he believed it was for a good reason, had hurt me deeply, and that pain needed to be acknowledged. When I returned home, I was determined to approach the situation differently. I knew that if we were going to move forward, we needed to have an open and honest conversation, one where we both felt heard and respected. That evening, I sat down with him again, but this time I approached the conversation with a calmer, more introspective mindset. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," I began, "and I want to apologize if I've been too harsh or demanding. I know that my insecurities are playing a big role in how I've been feeling, and that's something I need to work on." He looked at me, surprised by my change in tone, and nodded. "I appreciate you saying that," he replied softly. "I never wanted to make you feel insecure or hurt." "I know," I said, taking a deep breath. "But at the same time, I need you to understand that your actions do affect me. When you broke your promise, it made me feel like my feelings weren't important. I don't want to control who you can or can't be friends with, but I also need to feel like I can trust you to keep your word." He reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You're right," he admitted. "I didn't think about how much breaking that promise would hurt you, and I'm sorry. I don't want you to feel like you're competing with someone else for my attention." We sat in silence for a moment, holding hands, both of us processing the weight of the conversation. "So, where do we go from here?" I asked finally. "I think we need to find a middle ground," he suggested. "I won't cut off my friendship with Emily entirely, but I'll be more mindful of how much we're in contact. And I'll make sure to prioritize our relationship first. If you ever feel uncomfortable again, just tell me, and we'll figure it out together." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. We were both willing to compromise, to listen to each other, and to work on the issues that had been causing so much tension between us. As time went on, things began to improve between us. We started to communicate more openly, sharing our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. I made a conscious effort to work on my insecurities, reminding myself that our relationship was built on trust and that I had no reason to doubt his commitment to me. He, in turn, was more attentive to my feelings, making sure that I felt valued and loved. He reduced the frequency of his conversations with Emily, and when they did talk, he was transparent about it, letting me know what they discussed and why. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments when those old insecurities would creep back in. But we faced them together, supporting each other and growing stronger as a couple. I learned that it was okay to have doubts and fears, as long as we addressed them head-on and didn't let them fester. Our relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship ever is. But we were committed to making it work, to navigating the challenges that came our way, and to loving each other despite our flaws and insecurities. In the end, I realized that love is about more than just the initial spark or the honeymoon phase. It's about the everyday moments, the compromises, the trust, and the willingness to grow together. It's about facing your fears and insecurities, not alone, but with someone who's willing to hold your hand through it all. And as we continued to build our future together, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, with honesty, understanding, and love.